So again, we want to welcome everyone to our Arkansas Broadband Leaders Network meeting for September. This is going to be all about how to read the FCC data maps. And just to kind of give you an idea how this is going to flow a little bit differently than what we normally do. But my plan is to kind of run through some slides real quick and give you like some basics knowledge. And I will send you the slides after the meeting, so you'll have them as notes. But I think it's going to be easier for me to pull up the website and actually type in some addresses and show you what you see whenever you type in things. So like I said, we'll just run through real quick what it looks like and what you're looking at, and then we'll walk through, and at any point, if anyone has any questions, we've got a whole hour, and this is all we're going to talk about today. So, feel free to stop me at any time. I'm going to put the chat, so bear with me while I scoot things around on my screen here. But again, yes, so I'm Laurie. I'm with the State Broadband Office. Glenn Howie, the director, is with us today as well. If you haven't already, we'd love to know who you are and where you're from. So feel free to put that in the chat. We were talking about how excited we are that fall is here, hopefully, and there'll be no more 100-degree temperatures, hopefully. Yes, and how awesome of a football season it's going to be this year. Just some quick updates from our office for this week. If you didn't receive our email, but we did blast out an email on Tuesday to all of our county broadband committee members, our 5-year action plan, which is that executive summary that talks about basically the past and the present and our vision of the future in broadband in Arkansas, went out. We submitted it to the NTIA people at the end of August, like we were supposed to. So now you can have your hands on it. Please read the document. Let us know your thoughts on it. We've gotten a few comments actually so far this week from people, positive. Some people want to know where broadband's at in their neighborhood, which is kind of what we expected we'd hear. But it's coming, and y'all know that because y'all attend these meetings all the time. Last week, we held a kickoff meeting with the service providers who were awarded grants in our 3rd round of ARC grant funding. So there were 22 projects in total, and I think it went to 15 different service providers. They all came up here and we gave them the rules of the road and all the things that they need to follow. But on top of that, and this is why I really want y'all to hear about it, is we've asked every one of them to hold a town hall meeting in their communities where the projects are at, so that the people in the community, including your broadband committee, can be informed about what their timeline looks like, what the project area is exactly, who's going to be served. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. If you don't know what those projects are, you can find them on our website, broadband.arkansas.gov. Click on ARC grants at the top in the middle of the page. And then over to the side, you'll see either the ARC Awards map, or you can click on October 2022 awards, and that will give you like a table that shows all of the counties that have projects coming their way in the next few months. Most of those providers are pretty excited to get started. I know there are some town halls already on the schedule in Western Arkansas. I can't remember where. I'm so sorry. But if your county is one of those project areas and you haven't heard about the town hall, please reach out to our office and we will get you in touch with that service provider. Lastly, I want to brag on y'all. We're up to 42 broadband committees, which is more than halfway there. If this is your first ABLN meeting, welcome. If you're standing alone maybe in your county and you are the broadband committee, we're here to help you. So please reach out to our office and let us help you get a few more people on your team. I know a few state representatives have reached out, especially in counties that don't have committees so far, and they're doing a lot of legwork on their own trying to recruit people. So if you need a presentation done, or if you need some documentation or whatever you need, the broadband office is here for you. And our goal is to have all 75 counties with a broadband committee. So we're more than halfway there. And we appreciate all the help that y'all are doing for our office. So let's get into why we are all gathered today. We're first going to talk about the FCC National Broadband Map. And If you are a dual monitor person at your desk, feel free to open up the map in your own browser over there, but the address is broadbandmap.fcc.gov. Yes, I will send you a link following the meeting with the presentation, so you don't need to remember it if you're not in a place where you can go to it right now. But this is the FCC's location map that a lot of decisions are made off of. So when you first open it, like I said, I'm going to pull this up. I can't, well, let me, well, no, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. So when you first open the map, it's going to give you a big search field that you can type in an address. And what you're going to want to do is enter an address exactly, but you do have the ability to type in like county or a city or even a community. And the map will kind of shift over to wherever you're talking about. The catch is that you're going to have to zoom down to the street level to actually see the dots on the map that we're going to be talking about. Once you click on any of those dots, it will give you information that has been provided to the FCC as to what kind of service is available at that address. So anytime we talk about services being available at addresses on this map, always keep in mind that this is what the service providers have reported to the FCC and at the speeds that they claim to have at that address. Most of the information is accurate, but we have had some comments from some people in our town in our roadshow meetings where they say that their information is not accurate, and that's why we're here. One of the other things that we always advise people to do when they're looking at the FCC's broadband map is you need to adjust the map settings. So over to the side, and I'll click back real quick to show you, there's a little gear over here underneath your address. And when you click that gear, you'll go to the settings screen and you can adjust your filter basically. And what we look at is we want to see people that have wired and licensed fixed wireless service. We want to exclude those, they're like GSO satellites, the ones that are way far out, the Viasats and the HughesNet, you know, those don't count. DSL service does not count. They just cannot achieve the 100 by 20 speeds that we're working towards nowadays. So you want to make sure that those providers' reports don't affect the color of your dot on the map. Otherwise, everyone's dot is green, and that's not what you want to see. So once you select your technology, you also want to change your default speed setting to the 100 by 20 instead of the 25 by 3. And that's because we're moving in a direction of 100 by 20 being the minimum acceptable speed for broadband, where we used to be at 25 by 3. Hopefully the FCC will change these filters on their own sometime soon, but I think we've got to get a little bit further down the road first. So when you look at the dots on the screen, and I forgot to flip my graphic, but anytime you see a red dot in your neighborhood or maybe for your address or out in the county specifically, those are going to be any locations that are not currently receiving the 100 by 20 speed that we just set our filter to. So those, in our minds, we're going to be interpreting them as eligible for future grant awards because they do not meet the speed requirement of 100 by 20 from any fixed wireless or any licensed fixed wireless provider or a wired for provider like a fiber service or a cable service. If you see green dots in your neighborhood, that's good. That means everyone has service according to the FCC. Well, maybe that might not be good because that's just the reported service. So if your experience is different than maybe what is being reported to the FCC, you do have an ability to report that back to them. So in our top example here, this is just north of Sherwood actually, and all of the people in these neighborhoods have service. But then literally, I think if you go to the west of this location, you fall off into the unserved area again. These are the red dots that we really need the broadband committee to help us verify on the map so we can move forward with our planning process. So what happens is if you find something on the map that's inaccurate, and that could be my house is missing from the map, my house is not in the right location on the map, you can file what's called a location challenge to report to the FCC that their map is not correct, like with your physical location. And then there's another option for a challenge called an availability challenge, where if your service that you're able to receive at your house is not what's being reported to the FCC, perhaps you called and asked for service to be installed, and the provider was like, your house is too far off the road. We don't go out that far. It stops 2 houses down for you, all of that kind of reasons. They give you the ability to report that back to the FCC and let them know that their map is incorrect. So we'll first talk about location challenges. So again, if your house is incorrectly marked, or a house, it doesn't have to be yours, on the map, you have a button to the right of your address when you search for one that says location challenge. And again, I'll walk you through this in a second. But what you'll do is report to them, why you're filing this location challenge. Is it because that's not my house, or my house, my house is not an apartment building with 25 units. It's just one house, one residential building. There's many options on the drop down for the location challenge form. And so I'll show you those in a little bit, but keep in mind that whenever you open one of these tickets, you're reporting directly with the FCC and their map team and having them update your information. This is really important in those areas where maybe not everyone's showing up on the map, because we need to make sure that all of those locations are tagged. A missing location from the map, especially in an area that needs broadband service, is really important to be reported, because we need to be able to plan to build to that. And if they're not on the map, then we can't spend any money to build to their address. Again, the second kind of challenge that you can file is an availability challenge. And it's probably bigger on your screen than it is on mine, but to the right of your address and under the services that are provided there, you'll see an option and a link to click on an availability challenge. And again, that will pop open a form on your screen that you can report back to the FCC for any of the providers that show up for your address, and let them know that what is being reported to them is not your experience. So again, if you called to have service installed and the service provider came back and told you there would be a construction charge because you're just too far off the road, or maybe they're offering 100 by 20 service, but you never ever have ever received 100 by 20 service because of rain or wind or clouds or whatever, you have the ability to report that back to the FCC. When you open a ticket for an availability challenge, what happens is that information gets passed down to the service provider, and the FCC gives them a window of time to respond to your challenge. They can dispute what you say, so sometimes you might want to have backup, especially if you have an email or something in writing where someone's denying that they can install service at your house. You'll have the ability to provide that to the FCC. But otherwise, the FCC is kind of mediating this dispute between you and the service provider, and they're the ones who make the ultimate decision on who's telling the right story. I opened one of these one time, just so y'all know, and I was the person in the wrong, so you can be wrong, I promise. The availability challenges take a little bit longer to resolve just because of that interaction between you and the service provider and the FCC. But once all is resolved, and especially if your claim is found to be true, the FCC will update that map and switch your address either to be not served if that was the only provider that had 100 by 20 service in your area, or to have the provider update their filing with the FCC. So let me switch screens here, and we're going to pull up an address and just kind of talk through it real quick. Window. Okay, so y'all should see my national broadband map over here. And what we're going to do is, I'm going to still pick on my neighbors in Sherwood. Pull up my address here. So again, you enter your address, and then when it pops up in the drop down, you're going to select it. I don't recommend using your phone to access the national broadband data map. It is a very hefty, that's a good way to put it, hefty website. So, again, if we're talking about areas that don't have internet access in the first place, how do we pull up the map and everything. And that's, yet another challenge that we have to discuss and figure out ways to resolve. But so this person in Sherwood has a green dot. Oh, check. I need to remind myself. Make sure our settings are right. So all wired and licensed fixed wireless at 100 by 20. And so this neighborhood, it looks like everyone has service. And so it's good. But when I zoom in down here, there's quite a few dwellings that don't have dots on it. So maybe they may be barns, who knows? But if I lived in one of these buildings and I didn't have a dot on there, then that would be a reason for me to file a location challenge. So I would click the location challenge. I enter my information, and then I'm telling them that my house is not in the footprint, or it's not, the location's in the wrong spot, but you select what your reason for your challenge is. So again, whenever you select an option, it'll have more information about, like, maybe you don't have an address, but you need it to be a broadband serviceable location, a barn, a chicken house. I have a few chicken houses on my list that need broadband access. But again, you would enter the address that you're reporting. If you have any supporting documentation, especially, if you're dealing with people that live in apartment buildings, or, anything that has multiple unit numbers per address. I think another good example is like a mobile home park. They usually all have the same address, but everyone's on lot 1 and lot 2 and lot 3. All of those can be reported using this form. You can provide copies of documentation, like for location challenges, maybe a map or something that provided by the county, or a bill or something that shows that this is really your address, will work out. And then you would, on every form, they ask you to certify that you are telling the truth, and that here's the privacy statement. So once you click the submit button, that form goes directly to the FCC, who will review whatever you provided and let you know if you've been added to the map, or if they have any further questions, they'll get back to you. And I think that's usually within like 10 days. They move pretty quickly on these things. So the second thing I wanted to show you is, we're going to zoom out and find our friends, neighbors that have no service. That's Camp Robinson. There's nobody who lives out there. Well, I lost them. We're going to pick on our friends in Magnolia. So Magnolia is an interesting town, and I have no idea how we are going to tackle this challenge, but since Glenn saw it, Magnolia is an interesting town because half the people have service and half the people don't. So I'm not really sure what is going on here. If you can see Glenn in your screen, yeah. So that's going to be a very interesting challenge when we get there. But yeah, half of Magnolia, every other street or so, has service. But
so that would, and it's indication if there's a gap between locations and what the ISP is reporting there, right? So there is some gap between what the ISP is reporting as providing serviceable service to a location, and it looks like in other spots they're not, right? So that's one of the things that we're gonna have to work through in this process.
So Columbia County Broadband Committee, yes. But as you see, and I only know this because I know it's true, for Venetia can help. See, I knew you could. But I know just from our visits to Magnolia, which we've been there 3 times now, as soon as you leave the town, you get to all these red dots, and these are going to be our underserved or unserved customers. So just clicking on any random one, you see over in the services side that none of their providers are local except for AT&T, and that's old DSL service. So they definitely don't have any broadband out here. And this is a broadband funding eligible area. Yay. So it may be in Walnut Hills award that they're starting to work on right now. But yeah, so that's the difference. Again, when we're talking about the challenges, if you want to click on the availability challenge, let's say maybe somebody does provide service out here. or actually it's the other way around, but you know, AT&T, maybe they were claiming to offer fiber service out here instead of copper service. So once you click on the availability challenge, you want to select which provider that you want to challenge. So we'll say AT&T, and they do give you the option to send the challenge to the provider, or you can just tell the FCC and back away. So again, you know, fill out the contact information field, and then they want you to tell them about your experience. So if this is one of those examples where maybe you called to get service installed and they came back to you with a $12,000 construction fee, that means you're not serviceable. Anytime there's a construction cost rather than an install fee, you're not served. You're, you know, even if they say you are on here. So you can describe your experience in the field. And if you have like something in writing, maybe from the service provider where your order got canceled because it was unserviceable, you can attach that file here and it will get sent to the FCC and then on to the service provider if you pick that option. Any other question? Any questions? I guess I should start with. Something else that usually when I'm talking to people about this, there is an option at the top for mobile broadband, and that's going to be like your cellular service. It is on this map. Unfortunately, the state broadband office has no control over wireless internet or wireless cell phone service. Thankfully, I'm not sure that's a business we want to be involved with, but the FCC does report that data on this map as well. So if you're curious or if you want to challenge your cell phone serviceability, you are more than welcome to do that as a citizen. But yeah, we're just not, that gets very messy. I don't want to be in that business. I'm sure a lot of you don't either. Mr. Rainwater has 2 questions. We have a GIS system that would be much clearer. Oh, goodness. So those CostQuest licenses, yes, are a pain. Just to take a step back, so the FCC broadband map is, the FCC uses a vendor called CostQuest to manage all of their data. And all of this stuff, you know, even to export it, you have to get permission from CostQuest and the FCC to do so. We'll let us take your question and ask somebody at the FCC how you can gain access to it. I know they have some publicly available data, but I'm not sure how helpful that is to what you're trying to do. I know we can't share it based off of our license, but maybe when we do the Arkansas state broadband map, we might have some data available that we can share with you outside of CostQuest using our vendor that we're going to use for maps. So yeah, that's what I was thinking, that it was just zones. Glenn, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I just got back. So what did I missed the opening of the Q&A.
Oh, okay. So Will wants to know, like, Will, if I'm not mistaken, you're in Hot Springs Village. They have their own GIS map system, and they're trying to import the CostQuest data to build their own layer of broadband serviceable locations within their GIS map. But they've not been able to get through the hoops with CostQuest and the FCC to gain access to that data.
So, yeah, my initial response to that is we need to, and that's where we can come in, right? It's our office checking with FCC and CostQuest to make sure that I guess the group that you're representing is eligible to get a license and get the data. And if you are, then working to see what the problem is and help you get through the finish line, so we can investigate that for you. And it looks like the second question, someone complete the Arkansas survey in the map and just respond. Okay, and Will, if you want to clarify, are you talking about, in the second part of your question, are you talking about the current speed test that's linked on the state broadband website? If you can clarify that for us real quick in the chat. Yes, okay. It's an interesting question because we ran it. So just for those who don't know, there is a speed test link on the current version of the broadband website. Looks like Lori's going to run over to it real quick. That is, I don't want to say dated, but really dated. It's an older, it's been there for a while. You see on the right-hand side of the screen, there's this test your broadband speed. If you click it, I'm going to go ahead and click it, Lori.
Oh, yes, sir.
If you click it, it offers the ability to run a speed test. Now, I'm curious to see if hers works or not because the state firewall may block it. Oh, it looks like it's going to potentially do. So we'll see. But it offers the ability to do a speed test and then both download and upload. And then it goes into a, sorry, that's interesting because it's completely reversed.
I think that's the firewall, actually.
Yeah. So then it goes into a survey. So if you click the survey link, Lori, right below it, it asks for some information that would tag. So what this does is it tags the speed test you perform with a bunch of data and things that we ask you, and it logs it on a map that we have access to on our side. I will say this was incorporated, I think, several years ago now. And it played a role kind of back then for what they were doing at the time the office was. We're going to have sort of a version of this that we plan to roll out in the next, hopefully month or two. So if you want, feel free to do it. It'll go into a database that we have, although I would say we're going to come out with a newer version of this. And when this does roll out, the newer version, we will let everybody know. How? Let's see. Have you planned a process for mass updates? For example, if we develop a means of collecting data across the county, is there a way to use the data to update the FCC? Yeah, so there's two things, right? One is working through the challenges like Lori is talking about on the FCC site, right? She's been showing you that there's a location challenge and there's, I don't know if she's gotten to the speed challenge yet, but there's several different challenges you can do on the FCC site. That's one thing that you can do. What's also going to happen is, remember, this is going to be the foundation of the state map that we put out, right? And the challenge process that the state's going to run, likely Q1 24, so January, February, March. That's our certain time frame right now. And we're getting you trained up because we want you to be able to read this map that's on the FCC site, look at your communities, look at your county, get an idea of the areas that have the white and the red outlines to get you ready and know which parts of your counties to focus in on, right? And then Will said public data is just zones, not individual addresses. Yes,
That's with that publicly available CostQuest data, Glenn.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
It's not very helpful.
Yeah, and Hal, to answer your question, we'll reach out to the FCC because we have contacts there, and see what mechanisms are in place for what they call bulk challenges, and that's kind of what you're referencing. So that does exist, and we'll get with the FCC to see what the mechanics are on that, and then we can provide that information to our committees on bulk challenges specific to the FCC mapping process that Lori's talking about. Now, it'll be a little different. January, February, March, when we run the state challenge process, there's going to be some defined mechanisms to work through, but for this one, we can get you that information on how to do bulk challenges. We'll make a note of that.
All right. So are y'all ready to move on to the next one? The map's not scared you yet? I'll just tell y'all, whenever we go to these meetings with other state broadband offices, the FCC maps are like the most famous, most popular conversation at every conference that we attend. And I got to a point where I'm like, I don't know how much more we can talk about this. So, and now all the states are making their own broadband maps to go alongside the FCC's map. So let me hop back over to my presentation real quick. Share. And what we're going to talk about next is the FCC's funding map, which looks very similar to, sorry, my shortcut disappears. Looks very similar to the FCC map that we just talked about. So the funding maps web address is, guess what? fundingmap.fcc.gov. And what the FCC has done is they have combined the national broadband map with data that they've been able to collect from other federal funding programs. So if you're familiar or if you saw our broadband presentation, you've heard about the RDOF program, the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. That's a program that the FCC has. There is one called Reconnect that comes from the Department of Agriculture. There's one called Capital Projects Fund, which is the one that we're just now starting projects on, and that one comes from the Treasury Department. The FCC is trying to collect data from all of these different funding sources to find out which locations already have dollars assigned to them. So the meeting that we held with the service providers last week was part of the Capital Projects Fund, and all of those service providers have homework to respond to us before October the 1st with every location that's in their project areas so that we can forward that on to the Treasury Department and have this FCC funding map updated. Just, a couple things about it. This funding map, you'll see the service availability data on there, but you're not going to have the ability to challenge. So if you're trying to do a challenge or a location thing and you're not seeing those options, make sure you're looking at the right map, because they really do look like the exact same thing. And this is going to help you and your broadband committee as we're talking about those unserved and underserved locations, who actually needs to be on the list almost for the future funding from the BEAD program that we're working on right now. We're doing a lot of work on our side to identify those people and to create those project areas. But in order for those pockets to not get left out, maybe because they're reported incorrectly, or for whenever it comes to our project areas, and maybe you're looking at our map and you see that some people were left out in your opinion, well, it may be because there's already dollars assigned to their address. So the funding map's going to help you identify those people who are on a list to get built to at some point with some program that's just not the state's program. So just like the service availability map, you're going to need to adjust your map settings again and exclude or only include our wired and licensed fixed wireless friends at the 100 by 20 speed. And the difference with this one is that it has a little bit different of a map view. Green dots are still good, and those people have service, but you're going to start seeing some yellow, and the yellow are the dots that don't have service, and they have money assigned to them already. So as they stand today, those would be locations that are not eligible for any future grants from our office because the federal government has already assigned dollars to build to that address. It's just identifying the program, the service provider, and doing some legwork to find out exactly when that is. That's the fun part. So again, if you look at this little map, and I think I'm back in Magnolia on this as well, you'll see that people are served on one side of the street. That might be similar to where we were at, but and unserved on the other side of the street. So where you see the yellow dots, those are people that are in the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, and the provider that won that award is the Southwest Arkansas Electric Cooperative. So if you know anyone who lives in one of these yellow dots, they're on the waiting list for this project to get completed. If anyone from this area contacts our office, that's usually what I explain to them is that, well, your service or your provider has already been funded, and now it's just the waiting game to get the construction done. Again, the people on the opposite side of the street, this might exactly be the one I pulled up randomly earlier, but those people right now are not served. That's why they're red. And then they also have no funding assigned because they're not yellow. So the people across the street are potentially eligible for BEAD funds whenever we get to that point. Keep moving my windows around. Give me 1 second so I can see. Okay. So the pointers before we hop over to that map, and I'll show you around a little bit, but you need to understand that the broadband funding map is still under development. It is released for the public to use, obviously, but there's still funded addresses that we maybe have funded that don't show up on the map as having funding assigned. So a short way to look at it is that if you're looking across a project area that maybe you recognize somebody had gotten funding for already, or you've heard there's a project going on, if it was from the ARC grant and it was around 2B or 2C, so it would have been funded like in 2021, 22, there was no broadband funding map at that time, so those service providers are not being forced to report those locations to the FCC until the service is actually turned on and people are able to subscribe to that. I think most of those are pretty far down the road, so if there's someone building in your area or if you're in one of those projects, you're not going to be looking at the funding map to find out if there's funding coming your way. Like I said earlier, anybody who had a project funded with this round 3 of ARC grants that we did applications for back in October of 2022, those will show on the funding map, but not until later in the year, because again, those providers have until October 1st to report the locations that are within their project areas to us. And once we receive that data from the providers, we'll get that to the Treasury Department, who will get the FCC map updated. And then the last thing to think about is anything in the future that's funded from us. So those BEAD projects that we touch on, once we start running those grant rounds and we have awardees and everybody's getting started, that will be one of the requirements for those service providers as well, to provide us the locations within their project areas so we can get this map updated. So in the future, like the end of 2024, this map's going to be pretty robust and a good place for you to go to find out more about what's going on in funding in your area. So, well, I'll touch on this before I'll hop over, because like I said, the funding map's not nearly as exciting as the location map, but we're talking a lot about these maps because I think we said before, this FCC map is going to be what we're using as the base layer for the state broadband map that we're currently developing for our BEAD plans. So we need to do the work now to get the FCC's map updated, and then we'll continue that work once the state broadband map is updated to make sure the most accurate information is reflected, and we are assigning dollars to those addresses that need it. Your county broadband committee, of course, through all of this process, is our voice in your community to get the word out. So we're going to spend a few meetings talking about maps and how to read them and answering your questions, because we want you to be able to talk to your community and have them understand what they're looking at just as well as we want you to understand what you're looking at. So we want you to be able to be our voice in your county and pass the word on about these maps and how important it is to double check your address and make sure everything is correct on there. Anything that's inaccurate on the state broadband map when it comes out can possibly lead to locations being left out of project areas. So again, that's why this is such a big deal and why we're putting so much emphasis on it. If you want to make sure that all of your rural residents especially are notated on the map, start now getting familiar with the layout of your county and where all those locations are, and be able to interpret what the dots mean, because there may be some legwork involved. I know some counties were doing some door-to-door visits even, but this is one way to kind of get a big view of the current status of broadband in your county. And then lastly, we're having this meeting today and it's a lot of information, but we're going to have an office hours meeting like we normally do in a couple weeks, and take the next 2 weeks and just do some searching and investigate, see what you can find. And if you have any questions on what you're looking at, bring those questions to our next meeting and we can talk through it together and answer any questions you have, or maybe you've tried to introduce it to somebody in the community and they had questions that you were unable to answer. We stare at these maps all day long, so we're definitely going to be a great resource for you, and we'll help you get through those hurdles. Let me switch back to my web browser. I think I'm showing you the whole screen, but anyway. So again, for the funding map, I'm going to go back down to Magnolia because that's where I know things are at. So we're going to scooch back over here to the county. And this is the same road that was on the demonstration earlier. But again, so whenever you're searching, you can always type in a city if you're just looking, or you can type in your county name. But again, whenever it zooms in, you're going to want to go to all the way down to the street level to figure out what you're looking at. So for this community on the outskirts of Magnolia, again, all of these dots that are yellow are Rural Digital Opportunity Fund locations. And they're from the Southwest Arkansas Electric Cooperative. And you can kind of, sometimes if you search around, you can kind of figure out how big that project area is. So I'm still, I'm another mile or two down the road, and here they are still. Under the availability tab, it will show you, just like it does on the other map, all of the providers who report providing service to this address. But again, you'll see that nobody is providing 100 by 20, even though Viasat's down here at 100. They're not doing the 20 megabit upload, so that does not qualify them for being a served location. You've got to have both the 100 and the 20 to be taken off the list and have your dot turn green. That's the professional way to word it. These dots up here are very interesting because they're green and yellow, which means, again, they were funded by the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, but it looks like, oh, they've also been built to by Venetia and the team at Walnut Hill. So Walnut Hill is providing service to this address already. That's a different thing. I haven't found very many of those before. So that's really, that's really what I do. If you call here and you want to know about broadband service to your address, the first two places I look is the FCC's broadband map to see who provides service there already. If it's no one, I jump to the funding map to see if there's somebody maybe slated to provide service to you. If there's no one there, I double check our map, which that's what we're working to consolidate all of these searches into one thing, but just to make sure that there wasn't an ARC grant already awarded. And then lastly, that'll give me, well, between those three maps, that gives me the answer of do you have service? If not, when? And if all of the answers to all of the maps are no, then that's going to be somebody that will be eligible for BEAD funding in the future. 2024, with the goal of turning you on by 2026, I think is the right date. So any questions about the funding map? The regular service ability map is just way more exciting, I understand, but.
And we know it's a lot, kind of all at once.
It is a lot.
And that's why we want you to play around with it the next 2 weeks, get a bunch of questions, and then we're going to have a nice long 1 hour chat 2 weeks from now and walk through any questions and all that. And we'll also schedule one-on-ones, right? If we need to do Teams calls with individual committees and individual people on individual committees, we'll do that. And we'll work on it together. We'll share screens and share mouse and walk people through whatever we need to walk through. So
I know we're all not techie people, and I understand that. Don't worry. Like I told you, I even filed a challenge that was found out to be wrong because I did not realize what was going on at my mother's house. So I will admit it. AT&T beat me at the challenge process, but it's fine. Like I said, the next meeting will probably be, I think we've been doing office hours on Fridays, but in the meantime, if you've got a quick question or something, or we will get that to you. You can email me or you can call this office. Secondly, I will send the PowerPoint with the notes on what you're looking at, as well as the links to both of the websites shortly after the meeting. And like always, we'll have this uploaded to YouTube probably tomorrow for our friends and neighbors that weren't able to attend because it's a holiday. I had so many emails bounce back whenever I announced the meeting that people were on vacation. Lucky. So again, we appreciate your involvement in the broadband committees. Y'all are doing great work. I hear lots of positive things, especially when we're talking to people in the communities. So if there's anything our office can ever help you with, don't hesitate to reach out. We're here for you. All right. I hope y'all have a wonderful day. we'll stick around for a few minutes if you just got a random question. But yeah, you're free to. Oh, I gave you back a whole 10 minutes. You're welcome. So y'all have a great day, wonderful weekend. We'll talk again soon.
Lori, can you go back to the link for the funding map real quick? Thank you.